Aloha. Today is Friday, August the 2nd. We are officially in a new vortex of numerology, which is energy moving into August. We have the Lion's Gate. The Lion's Gateway is going to be peaking and coming to a close on, I say a close, but really it's an opening on August the 8th. It's an awesome morning out here on the Big Island, and it's 9:30 in the morning. And this morning I felt the pull to pull out the Kybalion. I've had this book with me for the last few years, and the Spiritual Laws of Ek as well. Two very small books that are super impactful, that have really opened my eyes up to the reality of energy and vibration and the polarities of consciousness and all of these gender roles and things like that, to further understand the mental capacity that happens in here and how it affects the outer world. And I am currently coming into this new state into my consciousness where I feel so much more grounded, and the last 7 months have been triumphant in the fact that I've really gone through and released some old programming, things that were so deep in there that I thought that I knew, but I didn't know, one of those things. And so it's nice to be able to pull these books out and reference them on occasion. And one of the things that I've been thinking about this morning is self-realization. And I mean, that's the point of the awakening process, is to realize the self and what it is and what it isn't and how it's shifting at all the time. Therefore, we are not in a single vibration constantly. There are pole shifts that take place all the time in our existence, and it hugely has to play into a lot of the people that we surround ourselves with, because we get into their vibration as well. And so before I get in to start talking about self-realization, I want to read a small part of this book on the principle of polarity. And it's just a really small excerpt about the realization of polarity. So I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs at the end of the chapter here. So it says that the student who is familiar with the process by which the various schools of mental science, etc., produce changes in the mental states of those following their teachings may not readily understand the principle underlying many of these changes. When, however, the principle of polarity is once grasped, it is seen that the mental changes are occasioned by a change of polarity, a sliding along the same scale, the hatter is readily understood. The change is not in the nature of transmutation of one thing into another thing entirely different, but it is merely a change of degree in the same things, a vastly important difference. For instance, borrowing an analogy from the physical plane, it is impossible to change heat into sharpness, loudness, heightness, etc. But heat may readily be transmuted into cold by simply lowering the vibrations. In the same way, hate and love are mutually transmutable. So are fear and courage. But fear cannot be transformed into love, nor can courage be transmuted into hate. The mental states belong to innumerable classes, each class of which has its opposite poles, along with which transmutation is possible. The student will readily recognize that in the mental states, as well as in the phenomena of the physical plane, the two poles may be classified as positive and negative, respectively. Thus, love is positive to hate, courage to fear, activity to non-activity, etc. And it will also be noticed that even to those unfamiliar with the principle of vibration, the positive pole seems to be of a higher degree than the negative, and readily dominates it. The tendency of nature is in the direction of the dominant activity of the positive pole. In addition to the changing of the poles of one's own mental states by the operation of the art of polarization, the phenomena of mental influence in its manifold phases shows us that the principle may be extended so as to embrace the phenomena of the influence of one mind over that of another, of which so many have been written and taught of late years. When it is understood that mental induction is possible, that it is that mental states may be produced by induction from others, then we can readily see how a certain rate of vibration or polarization of a certain mental state may be communicated to another person, and his polarity in that class of mental states thus changed. It is along this principle that the results of the many mental treatments are obtained. For instance, a person is blue, melancholy, and full of fear. A mental scientist bringing his own mind up to the desired vibration by his trained will, and thus obtaining the desired polarization in his own case, then produces a similar mental state in the other by induction. The result being that the vibrations are raised by the person polarizes toward the positive end of the scale instead of toward the negative, and his fear and other negative emotions are transmuted to courage and similar positive mental states. A little study will show you that these mental changes are nearly all along the line of polarization, the change being one of degree rather than of kind. A knowledge of the existence of this great Hermetic principle will enable the student to better understand his own mental states and thus those of other people. He will see that these states are all matters of degree, and seeing thus, he will be able to raise or lower the vibration at will, to change his mental poles, and thus be a master of his own mental states instead of being their servant and slave. And by his knowledge, he will be able to aid his fellows intelligently and by the appropriate methods change the polarity when the same is desirable. We advise all students to familiarize themselves with this principle of polarity for a correct understanding of how the same will throw light on many different subjects. And so the reason why I like to read and talk and think about the principle of polarity from the Hermetic principles and the Kybalion and the laws, spiritual laws of and things like that, is because it's not about changing into something completely different. It's simply about shifting the vibration of the polarity of the thought processes. Just like it talks about heat and cold. There isn't a moment where heat changes to cold. It changes from hot to a different degree, and it moves into being cold. Because hot and cold are the same thing. It's simply a different degree in vibration. Just like love and hate. Just like good and bad. All of these things are variations on a scale of vibration. So we can ripple that vibration by choosing to self-realize. To have the self-realization of what doesn't feel good and what does. Because in the human suit, this body, which is the mechanism of the feels that triggers our conscious and subconscious mind to react, when we can dial in to the programming and which shifts the feels in the body, that's our scale of polarity. That's when we can recognize where we are on the scale of vibration in our thought processes and what we're open to receive from other people. I find that whenever I'm in a place of really high vibrational self-love, what I am open to receive and take on and embrace from other people is way different from when I'm in a self of unworthiness and self-loathing. Then it's almost like this interesting thing, like vibrationally, those polarities inside of oneself will attract from the outside world, and not all the time, because there are various vibrations of feeling. So if someone is feeling down all the time, they may actually attract a high vibrational person because of this little vibration in them that pulls them in from the lower, but their light shines so high that they can shine over that person's lower frequency to bring them up. That's what happens with the electrons in the body when we engage in someone else's field. They can either drain us or rev us up depending on what each person's level of electrons is in their vibration of their auric field in their body. Whether it's clear or there's an illness or dis-ease of the mental state, all of that affects the vibration of polarity. Because really, like, everything is energy. Nothing is separate. Like, when I channel mudras and I do energy work and healing work with people, I'm not doing the work. I'm simply accessing, I'm channeling to move the vibration, which is what my hands are moving through now and coming out of and in of my body. So I'm not healing someone. I'm simply using my vibrational mechanism to move the energy so that it can transmute into the person according to what they need. That's the degree of separation and the degree of unity. It's this really interesting thing. And so our thought processes do the same thing. And, the whole aspect of self-mastery is self-realization. It's really difficult to be in relationships, whether it's intimate and with a job or a friendship, and we can see that a person isn't vibrating into their self-realization. The words that they're using, they aren't mentally tuned into the vibration they're putting out in the words that they speak. Their body language is giving off their internal vibration of thought process. And it's not on a level of judgment or thinking anyone's better than anyone else. When you're in tune, you read automatically because your vibrational antenna signal is heightened. Therefore, you're picking up different frequencies. That's the whole shamanic rhythm of this earth. Like if you're in tune with the birds and the animals and things pull you to take a look at it, you're at a heightened vibrational level. Therefore, you're receiving signals from earth, not just from other humans. It's beautiful. And so to self-realize means to be able to surrender to the things that cause distortion in the ley lines, in the waves of existence, because we're putting the energy out to other people, whether we're in their field or not. If we're connected to people mentally, they're receiving the vibration and vice versa. So not everything that comes in is for us, and it's important to remember that. A lot of the time we can hear things coming in through our mind, which is the channel, and that's not the signal of our own psyche. So it's important to realize to listen to what's going on in there, to sweep out and clean and think, no, that's not me. And because in some way it is. It's this interesting as above, so below thing. And so self-realization helps the human recognize the rhythms of vibration of programming, because we're all influenced. We've all been influenced and are influencing each other here on Earth and beyond, the multidimensional beings that are here as well. And so when we can self-realize, that means that there isn't a fear of self, because like, for instance, like if someone has some programming and they can't admit, or they're unwilling to admit that they have a vibration going on within them that is of abandonment, or they feel of lack of self-love, or they feel unworthiness and things like that, like it's not normal to live in that state of consciousness, even though it's part of our spectrum. So being able to see those things mirrored by other people and to embrace those things, to let them go. Like, it's okay to recognize that you live in fear. It's okay to recognize that you've been insecure. It's okay to recognize that you don't have courage in your heart right now, because those are all perceptions, because you do have all of those things. Everything you want within yourself that you see other people have, you have it too. It's simply a degree in perception of vibration of the polarities. Got to change the signal to turn it in, to recognize that we all have those things. None of us are lacking anything in this life. It's simply a degree of perception. So self-realization allows us to move past the facade, to move past the veils of the past programming, and to look around and decide how we want to feel by ourselves, not by what someone else says, not by even what we tell ourselves, to really clear the space to step into a light, to be able to readjust the antennas, the emotional quotient of the body, to be able to accept and receive and send out this different vibration. And the greatest thing that I've found, that I've had some of the hardest energetic struggles with humans is if someone is talking to you and they come to you and tell you the way that you're treating them, they're coming in and telling you about an energy that you're putting off, why don't you listen? Like, let's listen to that instead of getting angry and getting triggered and then making it about them. Like Like a lot of the time, people that tell us something that's going on within us that they see, it's out of love. It's not out of hate. Because someone that's poking you with a hot iron, that is jabbing you and telling you nasty things, that's not coming from a place of love. Well, it is. It's coming from an unawareness of love, because love is always there. It's just a different degree. They have more of the other end of the pole of hate versus being at a higher end of love. It's the same degree. And so that's what the whole vision and realization of polarities that comes in and helps. And so if someone is coming to you and they're telling you, hey, this is how I feel with you. Hey, this is how I feel about the way that you're treating me. And if you can't be calm enough to take in what they're saying, then that means there's something within you that is wounded, that you can't be open to hear what the other person, that you're not receiving them. And that's okay. It's not a bad thing, because it's all programming. And we don't realize this happening, because really it's a surrenderance of the programming that's been there, that's tapping on the subconscious, that's causing distortion in the conscious mind. It's just a degree of realization, right? To realize oneself. And the best way to do that is through other humans. I mean, I say the best. It's one of the hugest ways to do it, because there's more than 8 billion of us walking around on the planet. We're each other's mirrors. It doesn't mean we have to accept everything everyone says and does, right? Use discernment, listen to your own mind, connect after it's connected to the heart. Turn it in here to really listen to what someone else is telling you, because when someone else is telling you the vibrations that you're putting off, it may not be real, yet to them it is. So instead of pushing people away, listen to what someone else is saying, and then you can adjust the frequency. Then you can let them know, hey, that's not where I'm actually coming from. Let's talk about why you feel that way and what I said to trigger it. And like, it can be like this really beautiful flow of conversation. And that doesn't mean it's always going to happen, even if you open the door for that conversation in a calm light, because people can still get triggered. Their subconscious mind may not be on the level of which you are, and that can be emotionally painful to receive and to recognize, because sometimes we have to step away from those people in our lives because there's so much distortion in their programming. And it's not like a bad thing. It's just the realization that we are walking around in bodies that are wounded with emotional poison from the past. And we have to heal those emotional wounds. And we do that, but we can do that by actually like letting someone else poke our little wounded bodies by the reflections that they see in us. Now, if someone is coming to you in a way that is pointing fingers and placing blame, then it's up to you how to redirect that energy. You can tell the person, hey, I see that you're angry right now. Obviously, something in my behavior has triggered you. Let's take a second and bring it down. Let's create sacred space so that we can talk about it, so that we can reflect what you're feeling and what my behavior was or is, and see if it's valid. Or it's all valid because it's truth, but you see what I'm saying. And I say this to you as I say it to myself, because one of the things that I have been really empowered in working on lately within myself, even more so than ever, has been my reaction. How I share how someone else is making me feel, and how I'm open to receive how they're telling me I'm affecting them. So, and of course I get a little wounded and my solar plexus gets triggered and I can get a little defensive, and then I come back around and I've realized, like, okay, I do realize that I am raising my voice and I am getting triggered because I have a wounded child syndrome. I just had this realization 3 days ago. Like, I knew that I had come from wounded child and seeing all of this stuff. Yet for some reason the other night, it really hit me, like, wow, why is it that when someone else's vibration, when I feel a trigger, it instantly will trigger me and I can react. And that is not in a place of mastery that I enjoy anymore. Not that I enjoyed it before, yet it seemed to feed some chemical reaction in my body to get some sort of, serotonin pleasure from it in some fight or flight way. Yet I realized that that's not the authentic vibration. That for me, the authenticity is to be able to be reactive in a calm state, being able to understand what the person is saying, to receive them so that we can stay in a place of peace. and to be able to ride these emotional waves that we're going on. Because when we're coexisting with other people, we're riding each other's waves. And if you're in a community with a bunch of people, you're riding everybody else's waves too. And so it's like, it's all about the self realization in the face of the mirror, whatever reflection that is in front of us. And what's so amazing about our minds is that it doesn't take a lot of work. Did you know that you can tell your mind what to do and it will start doing it for you? And then, like, seriously, like our minds, our channel is so simple that we can literally have a realization, an aha moment, and then tell the mind, okay, this is what we're going to do now. This is what we're going to work toward. And you will automatically begin to do it when those situations come up again. You'll start to see the reminders of the new awareness that you've now embraced out in the real world. Because it's called the law of attraction. It's vibration. And so the realizations that we have within our own consciousness starts to show up. That's what confirmations are. That's what the synchronicities are. It feels like magic, but really it's vibration. It doesn't even have to have this whole mystical aspect to it. We can get way outside of the psyche, outside of the fun, and really just look at it from a realistic standpoint, that it is all vibration. And then we can start to have fun. Then we can start to be in the light of love, because it's like, whoa, I realize if I love myself and I love others, I'm going to attract that same thing. Yes, it's truth. And that doesn't mean it's going to be this awesome ride of just like love and light all the time, because we do involve ourselves with other people's psyches. And so that will trigger up things that we have moved through so that we can keep practicing the tools. I look at aha moments as tools that we pick up. Like I have a toolbox that I carry around with me, and I pick up these tools, and that's the aha moment. And then I learn to use this new tool. I have to practice with the tool to see how to work it appropriately in my psyche, like I'm building a house. And then I put that tool in my toolbox, and I don't lose the tool. Sometimes I forget it's there, and then I remember, and I pull it back out, and I get to use it again. And then it gets a lot easier because I've already practiced with the tool. That's all it takes is self-realization. It's empowerment. Self-realization is empowerment. And then that empowerment is a true vibrational light that we can then share with other people, that amplifies other people's signals. We're all activators. We're here activating each other. I know that that's part of my mission, not just in my energy work and things, but also in the words that I choose to speak, because those are the thoughts that I think within my own psyche. I say this because I am this. I share myself with you. And I know that I am no different than you. You know, it's just the realization of the reality of the non-reality, the dualistic polarities of consciousness. As above, so below, ride the wave. And being able to really like take the armor off. That's the way I like to look at it. It's like creating the sacred space to take the armor off so that we can be open. We can use the word, I almost said vulnerable. We can use the word vulnerable, but that just seems from like a different vibration. It's just like, it's simply being open to speak how we really feel past fear. Because I've come to realize that we hold ourselves back from speaking fear because of what happened to us in our childhood. Because we are domesticated creatures, just like dogs are. We are in a reward and a punishment system of learning in this society. And so when we're young and we're so pure and we're just so open, we want to express. And there's these adults that have this programming that's been passed down ancestrally that are telling us no and yes and trying to conform us to the constraints of how they've been disciplined and how they think and speak, when all reality, that's not our program. And so with just the realization that from when we're infants, when we're shushed and told because I said so, and go to your room or go to the corner or I'm going to spank you, because we want to express ourselves and we're looking at these people to show us love. Well, of course we're going to be like traumatized going into our years, into the teenage years and into the adult years, trying to find love from other humans that have all this programming too. So of course there's all this distortion. And so I realized that there's an inner wounded child going on in all of us. And I recognize this so much about myself recently because when we have the realization, that means we're actually on the other side of it. Because when we're in the programming, right? It's like the unaware machine just running to the rhythm of someone else's beat. Well, when the human recognizes the programming, that actually means they're already on the other side, the unaware and the aware. And so now it's about using the tool to collapse the gap between the knowing, which is the new reality, because we have to deprogram. And we deprogram through our thoughts, our words, our actions, and those of others. And so realizing this, and we can be gentle to ourselves and realize like, oh, we don't have to self-loathe. We don't have to hate ourselves. We don't have to hate anyone else or judge, or even though those things may come up. It's just a realizing that we're deprogramming ourselves from the mind matrix of what's been taught to us from when we were young, before we were even in the womb. Like, I know, like, my mother's never told me this, but I know that she really didn't want to have me. She was 18 when she got pregnant with me and had me when she was 19 and then got married. And she was a free spirit like me. And I came in to completely change her life. And I felt effects of this from her throughout my life, like envy and things like that. And just like these things. And I recognized it was because that's the path that we were supposed to reflect on each other. It's almost like I feel like I was supposed to have the life she was supposed to have, but not really, because that's why it happened. And I realized that she created these programmings of competition within me, yet I didn't want to compete with her. And so I realized I didn't have that motherly love because of those things. And it was because she didn't have the motherly love because it was passed down that way. It's all programming. I like, we can move away from the family trauma. We can move away from the unawareness that we have in the rhythms of which we speak and move. Because if the vibration doesn't feel good, if the vibration doesn't feel good to you by what you're receiving from someone else, that's your signal to take a look at, not someone else's. It's a reflection. And so while others, come to us with these different behaviors that trigger different things in ourselves, it's really a matter of looking in the mirror and think, what is this trying to tell me? And that doesn't mean with everything, because then we would just be crazy trying to figure it all out. And that's why it's good to go with the feels. The mind is a place to create, but the heart and the solar plexus is a place to feel, and the throat is how we create. The throat chakra is so important. That's how we manifest truly from our mind. Speak out loud what we want. Say how we feel and how much we love. And we move past all the programming, because in my family, we didn't have the sacred space to talk about how we feel. I'm from Georgia. I'm from the South, the Bible Belt, where it's like really, like, I haven't been there in years, but it's just not progressive or in the way that I see other places around the world are. So it's like, I recognize that no one's talking to each other, so there's no communication and no one knows how each other feels. All they're doing is feeling these vibrations that they're throwing at each other and creating these stories that could totally be like brushed out of the way if people would just open up the heart space and say, hey, I love myself, therefore I love you. Let's communicate. Let's create peace. And if not, let's create peace by separating. And then the conversation doesn't have to have it all, and then it's up to you to find the peace that you want in your mind, because it all boils down to self-realization and not taking on what other people say and think. Like, it's so much easier to live in a reality that's simple, even when it feels heavy, because we can recognize that everything is vibration. Everything's the same. There's no bad or good, simply the perception of the psyche. I find that it does take courage to speak truth, because we have fear so embedded. And like, when we have courage to step into a light that we want to do, even if it's not just the psyche, if it's engaging with other people, wanting to make new friends, wanting to try new foods, things like that. Like all of that is a choice. And so, just like what the Kybalion was saying that I was just reading, that it's a matter of recognition of self realization to shift the polarity, to shift the degree in which the consciousness is present. And then life becomes more fun and it doesn't become so heavy. And then we can move out of the way of other people's psyches so much easier without having to take it all on. In my human design, I have all open channels. I'm a manifester, and my main source is my solar plexus. So I'm understanding more about the emotional waves that I ride. And not everyone is open in the solar plexus center. So not everyone is riding the emotional waves like I would or someone else would. So it's important to recognize those things too, because while we have a choice in the psyche, there is actually a rhythm to the program of each human. It's really fascinating. And so I encourage each and every one of you, as I continually encourage myself, to step outside of the programming. If something doesn't feel good to you, don't put all of your energy into it. Simply look at it, move it out of the way, and then shift the polarity, shift the vibration by choosing something else to insert into this machine up here so that it can flow. And then it can overflow in the field, right, of the energy so that we can receive it back in return. And then things start to get lighter and more magical, and vibrations start to feel yummy in the body, and we get all this inspiration of creativity and love in the heart, and all of these amazing things start to take place. We literally make our physical vessel healthier by our thought choices. Epigenetics is a huge thing. We can upgrade and activate and regenerate our DNA to much heightened levels than before through sound therapy and things like that. So, we can really enhance this mechanism up here in huge ways. Huge ways. Cleaner food, sounder mind, listening to the solfeggio tones and sound tuning and all kinds of things. Like, if you don't want to focus on your psyche, if you just can't get out of this depression, if you can't get past out of this mindset, shift your focus and start looking at your body and how you can enhance the vibration of your body, and your thoughts will enhance with it. I love you to the moon, family. Sending out lots of love to everyone up on Mauna Kea. So much love for everyone up there holding it down and protecting the Aina, the sacred space, which is Hawaii for the rest of the planet. I love you to the moon. Thanks for tuning in.